The worst for me in Gaza was when they tortured Keith and they tortured the girls. Keith's 65 years old. One of the girls, they beat her up into pieces. They handcuffed her and they put a blanket over her. And they beat her and beat her while I heard everything. And I wanted to scream.
Before we continue, please help the algorithm boost our reporting that asks the questions others won't by liking this video, clicking subscribe, and turning on all notifications. Thanks for supporting the Daily Signal. Now back to the video.
Aviva, thank you so much for being here. You were held hostage in Gaza for 51 days. Your husband, Keith, has now been a hostage for over 14 months. You have been speaking out nonstop, advocating for his freedom, for the freedom of all of the hostages who remain in Gaza. Do you feel like your voice is being heard?
You know, I can feel when I talk to people that they're listening to me. But Keith is still there. And the girls that I was with that are there are still there. And all the hostages. So I'm talking for them. And I do know that while I was in captivity, I thought that I was forgotten. And I just hope that Keith and the hostages are keeping themselves alive and doing everything they can to keep alive, because they're going to come home. And we need them to come home today.
Yeah. On October 7th, you were in your home when the terrorists attacked. Did you have time to make it into the safe room in your home or into a neighbor's safe room?
Keith and I, in the houses on Kibbutz Gaza, come from a community that 64 people were murdered on the 7th. Mothers were raped in front of their family. And people were burnt alive, if you can think about that. There's children that hid themselves in cupboards. And there were children, 2 babies that were just left in a crib while they killed their parents for 17 hours. So Gaza has had the missiles attack from Gaza for years, more than 20 years. I used to hide behind trees. When I saw the missiles coming all the way towards me, I used to just pray and hide myself. And in the last maybe 10 years, they built a little shelter in every house. So Keith and I ran to our little shelter. And for the first 2 ones, we didn't even close the door or the window because we don't have any time. When the alarm comes on, then there's an explosion. So we don't even have time to turn around and close the door. But after 2, we stepped out and we saw all the missiles from Gaza going all over the country. And it felt like the end of the world. So we ran into our little shelter and closed the door and felt safe for a second. But then we understood that there's noises that we didn't hear ever before, and that was Hamas terrorists killing people already. And it's just beyond to think how easy it was for them to come in to our community and kill people in a way like that and take Keith and I with our pajamas. Keith is 65 years old. He's an American citizen. I'm 63, and we were treated not like humans need to be treated, in such a brutal way. Every minute that I was there, I thought that I would be killed by Hamas terrorists.
If it's okay, I want to ask you just a little bit more about that. You all, I know you were put into actually your vehicle, and terrorists drove your vehicle into Gaza. Was it just you and Keith and the terrorists in the car? Were there other individuals taken from your kibbutz in that vehicle?
Keith and I were in our little shelter for 4 hours, and maybe an hour before we were taken from the Hamas terrorists, we heard the Arabic from outside, and then we heard them walking in our house, shooting the house. You know, there's bullets where I was standing while they tried to kill me. And what saved our lives is Keith put his head on his knees and his head and his hands on his head. And they took us in such a brutal way. They tore Keith's shirt, they pushed him, they broke his ribs, and they shot his hand. And they took us in Keith's car while a Hamas terrorist was with a knife in front of my face, and one was with a gun in front of Keith and I face, all the way to Gaza, while the people in Gaza welcomed us by clapping their hands, shooting in the air. It was a party for them. They knew we're coming, while Keith and I were shaking and did not understand, what are we doing in Gaza with our pajamas? We're innocent people, We're peacemakers. We want good for everybody. And, Keith, as American, grew up in North Carolina, Chapel Hill. His mom was waiting for him. She just passed away a couple of days ago. She was 97 years old, and I'll never forget in Gaza. Keith looked at me and he said, the first thing I want to do when I get out of here is to go and hug my mom. So it's been a very difficult week for me. Standing at the grave of his mom while he wasn't there, while he is underneath the ground with terrorists.
It's hard to comprehend, really.
It's been difficult.
I know when you got into Gaza, you all were immediately taken underground into the tunnels. What were those conditions there?
The worst. I shaked while I was walking down. And one of the tunnels, Keith and I were moved 13 times. And one of the times we were taken underneath the ground. And the Hamas terrorists just left us there. They left us there to die. I'm lucky to be sitting here alive. They didn't even give us food, and they didn't leave us with hardly any water. And we were there for more than a couple of days until one of the times Keith looked at me and he said that he feels that he can't breathe. And I looked at him and I could see. And that's exactly what I felt. We nearly died there. And then while he was lying down, I said to him, just try and breathe. I couldn't even look at him to see his chest going up and down because I was scared that I would see him dead.
How did you survive that?
I don't know, but I want to tell you that I touched death. And that's one of the hardest things in earth. While we were lying there, I was trying to think, what is death going to feel like? Am I going to die before Keith? And just prayed that I die first, because I did not want to see Keith suffer. The worst for me in Gaza was when they tortured Keith and they tortured the girls. The worst.
Do you mind if I asked you to expound upon that? Are you comfortable speaking to what that looked like?
Of course. I was there. I saw everything. I felt everything. I saw the girls coming back after. One of the girls that was touched.
These are other Israeli hostages
Yes.
that were with you? Okay.
And they're young, the girls, and they've never ever been touched. And after the Hamas terrorists did whatever they wanted to us, to the girls, and touched them, they just had to smile after it happened, as if nothing happened. And they wanted to just run away or vanish, but they couldn't. And I had to hide myself crying, because all I wanted to do was cry. I tried to protect them, but I couldn't. They didn't let me. And for me to see these girls being tortured and touched, and Keith tortured and touched, while I just had to try and not cry or scream. One of the times they took Keith and they shaved him looking like an Arab, and he came out and he wanted to cry because he sat there like he's not a human being and had to let this terrorist do everything he wanted to Keith. Keith's 65 years old. One of the girls, they beat it up into pieces. They handcuffed her and they put a blanket over her. And they beat her while I heard everything. And I wanted to scream. And when she came back, she sat on the floor next to me. She was shaking and crying like a baby. She was red all over. And I couldn't cry. And I couldn't hug her because they didn't let me.
Were you all allowed to speak to one another, to encourage each other, to share words?
Most of the time in Gaza, all I did was lying down on a filthy, dirty mattress, if there was a mattress, sometimes just on a yoga mattress, and looking at the ceiling and just praying that the ceiling won't fall on me. Because all the missiles that were going from Gaza towards Israel came out of those buildings, and the building shaked. We weren't allowed to talk. We weren't allowed to whisper. Only sometimes they let us whisper. So we had to just keep quiet. All the time. We weren't allowed to stand. We weren't allowed to move. You know, when I got out of there, I had an infection in my stomach. I lost 10 kilos. And I had to lean on somebody when I walked. I was so weak. And one of the times, Keith had to go to the bathroom. And he tried to get up from the mattress from the floor. And he fell. I'll never forget that. And that was the moment that I started hiding food for Keith. Because we hardly got any food. And he was losing weight. I lost 10 kilos in 51 days.
Wow. What did you say to Keith the day that you learned you were going to be released, but he was not?
I looked at Keith in the eyes and hugged him and said to him, you be strong for me and I'll be strong for you. And I think that was the most clever thing that I could have done, because I know it's keeping me, and I'm sure that it's keeping Keith. And he's doing everything he can to stay alive.
Do you allow yourself to dream about the day he's released?
Of course. I have to.
Yeah.
I have to. I can't even. Wow, you know, my heart will explode. I will scream. I will jump into the air. And wow, it's just going to be, wow, it'll be, I don't know. I'll dance. Yeah. I'm sure that I'll dance and scream. But you know, one of the times when we did separate from the girls that we were with, we didn't know if we'll ever see them again. Just like I didn't know if I'll ever see Keith again. I didn't know where they're going to take me, if they're going to kill me or rape me. So when we did separate from the girls, I remember saying to them, when we see each other in Israel, we're going to scream.
Have those girls been freed yet?
No, they're still in Gaza. So we're going to scream. I'm going to have quite a few people to scream when they come back. One of them is my daughter's best friend, Emily. She's from Kibbutz Kfar Aza. And Gali and Ziv and Doron are from Kfar Aza. I know them.
Wow. What is your message to Americans? Keith is, of course, an American. What would you say to his fellow Americans?
That my life and Keith's life and my family's life and lots of families in Israel have been taken away. We need to be free to live. Everybody in this world needs to live, and to live a good world, just like Americans live. And going through what I went through, that was hell, and knowing that Keith and the girls and the boys that are still there are lying underneath the ground, 40 meters, without any oxygen, starving and begging and screaming to get out of there, and just trying to think who is going to be the next one to be raped, to be touched, to be starved, to be thirsty, to be screamed at, to be beaten at. It just breaks my heart. Nobody in this whole world, nobody should go through what I went through and what the hostages are going through.
Aviva, thank you for being willing to share your story. Thank you for your courage and being willing to speak out.
I just want to say one more thing.
Please.
I'm just a person with a heart. And Keith is the most sweetest person in earth. And I know that him too, and me too, want good for the good people in Gaza. For me to think about mothers having babies in tents, and older people trying to get themselves from a dirty mattress in a tent in Gaza for a year and 2 months. That's really bad. Israel and the whole region and the whole world should be a better place to live.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.